Can you type something into your message block if you can hear me this morning, this evening, your evening, my morning? Ah, hi, Jocelyn. Good morning, Adam. I'm glad to see you. Hi, Beth. Good morning, evening. Good, good, Julia. Beautiful. Terrific. Well, we're going to wait just a few more minutes till everybody gets on board here. It is. Uh, shall I give you a bit of a travelogue? So I'm in Brooksville, Florida, and if you go to the map of Florida, Florida has this little, you know, comes down like this. And everybody probably knows where Orlando is right sort of in the middle of Florida. And if you go west from Orlando, about 2 hours, and if you go north from Tampa, about an hour, that's Brooksville, Florida. And there's absolutely nothing here of note, I must tell you. There is a very old 1950s amusement area called Wiki Wachi Springs. We have um, in this part of Florida, north of Tampa and Clearwater and those places. How far am I from Disney? 2 hours, Clive. I'm just, I have to decide if I want to have shiny eyes with my glasses. 2 hours from Disney. Have you been there, Clive, to Disney? You'll let me know. Oh, yeah. Okay, he's going to let me know now. Um, we tend to go to Disney dental meetings. No, but planning on taking the grandkids. Yeah. Well, it's a good place, of course. I think it's very expensive for normal people, but it's one of those once in a lifetime things that you do. And when you check into one of the Disney hotels, they have all the characters walking around. I mean, it's just the kids are like died and gone to heaven when they go to Disney. So I'm sure you will enjoy taking your grandchildren there. We go to Disney for dental meetings because all of them want to come there because it's sort of like Las Vegas. It's one of those destination places where um, if you go and your grandkids or whatever come along with you, then or died and gone to Alligator, yeah, heartbreaking. What Clive is mentioning is that there was that poor child who was grabbed up and did not survive the alligator attack at Disney. So I mean, very, very heartbreaking. So yes, when your grandchildren go with you, Clive, you'll be very careful with them, won't you? You'll keep them very close to you. Um, so in just a couple of weeks, I'm going to be actually going to Orlando and flying to Los Angeles and then getting on another plane and flying to Melbourne, and I'll be down there for a whole month with you all. Um, some of you, Adam, I've known you for a very long time. Some of you know that I've been coming to Australia since 1995, and after a bit of a hiatus in there, I have started coming back again, which is one of my most pleasurable and wonderful things in life to be with all of you. And it's through the invitation of Carl Burrows and Marketing Dentistry over these last couple of years that I've been able to come and engage with a number of people in both Melbourne, which is sort of my home base, and Sydney and Brisbane as well. So it's just at 5 o'clock my time in the morning. It's just 7 o'clock your time. And I see we have a really nice group of people. So I'm going to just begin with the program that I've started for you now. One of the things we wanted to do was to introduce several of you who've not yet met all of the presenters at this year's Marketing Dentistry 2016. Give you a little bit of a taste of what you're going to have this year. And I know that David Penn has done a webinar much like this a couple of weeks ago, and Michael Abernathy has done a presentation as well. And so this is my turn to connect with all of you. And then I think next week or the week after, Tracy Penn, my partner down there, is going to be doing a similar one. And um, so while I certainly want to make sure that you all know that Tracy and I and Michael Abernathy and David Penn will be uh, putting on a really good one-day program for each of these three cities in August. I also want to make sure that you take home something that's um, nice and chewy today, because I don't want this just to be a promotional kind of thing. I really wanted more than anything to be able to introduce you to the way we think, and therefore what kind of content and material you will get when you attend marketing dentistry this year. So I had to step myself back from the specifics of our program, where Tracy and I are going to be working with dentists and their practice managers to help them construct a very solid, concrete, um, intentional role for their practice managers in the practice. So I want to step back from that a little bit and look at the bigger picture, because as I'm working with practices, uh, listen, there's not much that's different in the world. What's going on in Australia is exactly what we have experienced or are experiencing here in the United States. And I've just been in other places. In Great Britain, it's the same. In Sweden, it's the same. It's very, very similar, really all around the world. Um, the kinds of things that dentists particularly are experiencing. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the challenges that we are facing in the United States. And I've said for years, pay attention to what we're going through, because you're going to go through it. I've always found it paradoxical that in many ways we are so far ahead in the United States, so far ahead of you in Australia in making a mess of things. We make a mess of things really early. Um, and in many ways, you are so far ahead of us in innovation and technology and all of those things. So I have had the really pleasant opportunity to watch how Aussies focus on a number of things and bring those insights back to my work with clients in the United States. And simultaneously, I've watched the kinds of things that people in the US have gone through and almost been able to sort of sound a warning klaxon saying to those of you in Australia, be aware that this is coming. Be aware the corporate dentistry is coming and it's going to change the way you practice. Be aware that the insurance plans and the benefits packages and those kinds of things are starting to make certain decisions that are going to impact the care that you can provide your patients, and it will impact your practice. Be aware that OSHA regulations are going to come and impose sometimes regulations that make no common sense at all, but it's going to come and it will impact your practice. So here's one of the things that I've come to realize pretty much across the board, and that's that every single solution to every single problem, with the exception of clinical innovation, comes through the strength of the people you have employed around you as your staff or your team. Every single one of them. We have in the United States an organization called Delta Dental. It was the American dentists' answer in the 50s and 60s to this thing called dental insurance. And when the labor unions in the US started organizing and getting medical insurance and then dental insurance, the dentist said, wait a minute, we can play at this game too. So we're going to start our own dental insurance. And Delta Dental was founded by dentists who wanted to exercise more control over how they practice dentistry. And so they sort of saw the handwriting on the wall that these insurance companies were going to parse out little bits and pieces of benefits that could restrict the quality and the extent of the care that could be provided, which is certainly something that's absolutely true, and we've all experienced that. So they started this thing called Delta Dental, and they were on the board of directors, and they made the benefits as generous as possible because it was nonprofit. Nobody was making money on it. It was nonprofit, and they made sure that when new things, think about this, in the 50s and 60s, one of the biggest innovations to hit dentistry was two things. One, the high-speed handpiece, which revolutionized how restorative work was done, crown and bridge. Other than that, can you imagine prepping a crown with a slow speed handpiece? But that's what was happening back then. So the high speed handpiece and dental sealants, I mean, changed everything dramatically for children's dental health. The other private insurance companies weren't providing any benefits for dental sealants. And Delta, run by dentists, said, "Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. Dental sealants are an innovation, and that benefits for that must be provided." So for the longest time in the US, Delta was the only insurance company benefits package that covered dental sealants for children. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and through a series of really, really dumb mistakes, American dentists lost control of Delta. They would send in their proxy vote, not run for the board. And so now Delta is now run by what we call bean counters, chart accountants and money people who are constantly looking over the bottom line, not the welfare of the patient, as you are. See, that's what you care about, the welfare of the patient. What's right for the patient, not what's right for the fund. And those bean counters now make lots of money, even though Delta's still nonprofit. They make multi-millions of dollars a year, and their salaries and incomes are based on how much revenue they keep in Delta, as in how much they don't pay and how much they can continue to gobble up all the employee groups. So Delta now insures in the United States teachers, police, fire, public employees, all kinds of things like that. Now, maybe that's okay. It's put a cramp in a lot of people's style, but all right, until just recently. And now Delta has decided that any dentist who participates in Delta has to follow new rules they put into place. And the new rules are very, very limiting on what dentists can provide. And without going into the details of what those new rules really encompass, the bottom line is that if you are a dentist who is providing dentistry for a Delta patient, your quality of care absolutely drops because of what you're able to provide, the services that they will reimburse you for. And throughout this process, Delta has gotten into the head of the patient that these money grubbing dentists, all they want is to get into your pocketbook. And if you stay with Delta, don't go to somebody who doesn't take Delta, you're going to be better off because you're going to have someone who's honest and not trying to make a buck off of you and all of these things. Well, that's all well and good for them to say. It's not accurate. And they don't, of course, mention the extent to which their limitations and lowering of services is having a big impact on patient care and ultimately on long-term things. There's no question, for example, that dental implants are here to stay. They are one of the most revolutionizing um, innovations in dentistry in, I can't even say decades, an eon almost. And Delta doesn't want to pay for it. So they're sort of condemning their patients to bridge work, removable prosthetics, when dental implants could change these people's lives dramatically. And dentists are quite upset about this. One, because, listen, implants is really sexy. It's fun. It's interesting. It's challenging to your clinical brain. It's all of the things that makes dentistry fun and exciting for so many of you. And to have a patient base who won't even consider doing that because their benefits plan doesn't help them is pretty aggravating. All right, so why am I telling you this story? Because in droves, dentists are trying to figure out how to get off of Delta. How do you get out of this? In some cases, the numbers of patients or percentage of patients that are Delta dentists is up in the 60s and 70%. What would happen to you if all of a sudden you were to lose or have the potential for losing 60 to 70% of your patient base? It's pretty frightening. And so over these last couple of years at least, it's been more like 8 or 10, but it's now really hitting home. Over these last couple of years, I've been working with a number of clients, particularly groups that and dentists that perceive themselves as offering very comprehensive, interdisciplinary, what they would call high-end dentistry. I've been working with them to help them figure out how to position their practices and get out of plans that ultimately depress the quality of the care and therefore what they can offer to their patients and their practices. And the answer to how they do that is pure and simple. It's not easy, but it's pure and simple. And the answer is you have to have a brilliant, highly functioning group of people. Just, it doesn't happen any way else. You know, this program that we're doing in August is called Marketing Dentistry. And you're going to hear from the presenters a lot of ideas about how to promote your practice and how to make sure people know that you're there. And of course, IDM does amazing work with people's websites, which is a very important and key connection point for you to bring new patients into your practice. And if you just open your mailers that come every day to your practice, you will see that there are any number of offerings that people give you about this program and that program and this special new patient jingle thing and this answering service. And I mean, all of these kinds of things that are out there that would help you to bring new patients into your practice and promote your practice. But I've always said to the clients I work with, and I would say it to you as well, don't spend a dime on any of those programs out there until you have a group of people around you, your staff, your team, who are functioning at the highest possible level. So that when you do spend money, hard-earned money, on programs to attract patients to your practice, you've got a culture, you've got a circumstance, you've got a situation there where people come who connect with your practice, feel heard, understood, well received, beautifully treated, and get exactly what they want when they come to your practice. I liken it, it's dark here in the morning, it's what, 5:15 a.m. But even at that, it's about, in Fahrenheit, about 85 degrees outside. It's hot. Gets up to 90 or 95, or going to hit 100 probably today. Hot. So I liken this whole process. Oh my goodness, no, I haven't lost you. I liken this whole process to having the air conditioner running at full bore, but having the doors wide open. Here you are with the air conditioning pulling in all these new patients, but here you are, if you do not have a stellar team, with the doors wide open, and they're either going to walk in the front door and straight out the back door, or they're never going to get to the door in the first place. So that's the circumstance, that's the sort of substrate within which I want to engage our discussion today. And I want to make sure you know that there's a little block down there in the, I think in the left-hand corner of your screen. So at any time, you are welcome to type in a comment, a question. I will do my very best to respond to as much as possible during our time together. So that's the agenda that I really want to talk with you about today, and then we will move on to any comments or questions that you have. So this is what I want to emphasize for this discussion, and that's that if you have an ordinary practice, you can have ordinary people working with you, and then you will have ordinary structures, systems, approaches, all of that. And when that's the case, you need a whole lot of new patients. You got to have a whole lot of them. Many, 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 many. Because through that ordinary system will trickle X number of people, some who will stay with you, some who will come back to you later if they have a problem, and others who will just go away. If, however, you are working hard to be clinically very sound and strong, if you want a practice that's very stable, if you want to be better than ordinary, if you want to compete at a different level, you cannot have an ordinary group of people around you. You have to have stellar people. And I think that it's important to make sure that you're clear about what either you would mean or what I would mean about stellar people. They have to be competent at doing what they do. They have to be enthusiastic about your practice and why you're in business. What have you hired to help them accomplish? They have to be mature. And I'm not talking about chronological age so much as the way they think about things. Think about one of the most destructive things in your practice, and I think we have a number. I'm looking at oh hey, a couple of good friends. Thank you. I'm looking at the people who are here. Yeah. There are a number of you on board this morning who are practice managers. There are a number of you who are dentists as well. So both of you will hear what I'm saying, I hope very acutely. We cannot afford to have people who are childish, immature, competitive with their coworkers, gossipy, snotty. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. You can't afford that. We need people who have the ability to address inevitable conflict. Conflict is always going to occur in a group. We want conflict to occur over issues that are related to delivery of patient care. There are two people sitting at reception. One of them is engaged in a conversation with the patient about what's next on their treatment plan and how long they have to save money before they can get it scheduled, or important stuff. And the other person is very busily answering the phone because the phone is ringing. And simultaneously, there are people coming into the practice who need to be greeted and made to feel comfortable. That's a situation that creates inevitable conflict, limited resources, infinite possibility of opportunity. Now, the conflict can't be at the level of carping at each other. Well, you should have put that phone on hold and greeted that person. Well, you were just up there talking with this person. I mean, you guys have heard this probably before, or certainly observed it in yours or other practices. That's not how conflict needs to be handled. Maturity means that when those things occur, inevitable conflict, competition for resources that are finite. You only have a certain number of hours of the day, you have X number of members of your team, you have a certain number of chairs that you can put bums in seats. You have that kind of limited resource. When that occurs, people recognize that it is a stress on resources, not she's not doing her job, get rid of her, or whatever it is. Maturity means that those two people say, boy, it's getting harder and harder for us to handle all the things at once, isn't it? Yes, it is. Well, let's get the group together and talk about what we could do to solve this problem. Because they recognize and they understand very, very clearly that how they respond to the competition for resources, a patient who's trying to figure out how to pay for dentistry that they want you to do and you want to do, a patient who is on the phone trying to make an appointment as a new patient to come and see you, and a person who's already chosen you coming in for more dentistry. I mean, each one of those in and of itself is a really good thing. So how do we address and deal with those kinds of circumstances? In the world of Tracy Penn and Sandy Roth, when we talk about this, we recognize that this is a challenge for which the practice manager must be prepared. The practice manager must be a key person. Now, the practice manager may be one of those two people at reception, but elevating yourself and being elevated as a practice manager to a different role means that you need to participate, lead, and guide problem solving like this. To engage, we can't just turn to the dentist. You poor dentists. We turn to you for everything. Doctor, the trap is plugged up. This needs to be fixed, and I can't get this computer thing to work. And Mrs. Jones wants to talk with you privately. And I mean, all the stuff we put on our doctors that's over the top, when really what you need to be functioning on as a clinician is the care you're delivering patients. Why would one have a practice manager in the first place? Because hypothetically, that person is skilled, mature, competent, has the personal gifts and styles to manage day-to-day operations in the practice, so that the dentist and the clinical staff can stay focused on clinical care and delivery of clinical care. We can't expect a practice to be extremely strong and powerful when the dentist is simultaneously having to oversee all the clinical operations and the clinical delivery of care and oversee day-to-day operations of the practice business and simultaneously oversee all the patient relationships. It's not possible. And so Tracy and I talk often about the dentist having a board of directors. We call it a leadership and management team, a board of directors, where, and if you look at many companies, they will have a CEO, chief operating officer, chief executive officer. Then they'll have an operational manager, practice manager, COO. Then they'll have a CFO, chief financial officer. And they might have a director of manufacturing, for example, someone who does development or fundraising work. I mean, when you look at the way corporate structure occurs, there's a lot we could learn from it. Now, we don't have that many people, of course, but we do have a need for certain roles. The dentist, in our opinion, this is all our opinion here. The dentist has a serious obligation to oversee the clinical operations, primarily with the idea of ensuring that the clinical standard of care is met. Your dental license, training and license, gives you the obligation and the responsibility to do 4 or 5 things. Examine. I mean, the rest of us can look at a mouth, and while many of us can recognize decay when we see it, and we can recognize a broken tooth, and we can recognize that there's a missing tooth, and many of us can actually read an x-ray with some acumen. That examination, by law and by training, is something you are fully responsible for. So that is in your wheelhouse. So examination is an obligation, responsibility of the dentist. Diagnostics. What does all this mean? Why is this area of the mouth under such stress? What is causing the bleeding? What is causing the mobility? What is causing the wear? What is causing the TMJ pain? Diagnostics, where you look at the clinical findings, you filter that through your brainiac brain, and you come out with the diagnosis. Periodontal disease, bruxism, parafunction. You know all of these things. Diagnosis. The third thing you're responsible for as the clinician, dentist, whether you're the owner or not, by the way, what the third thing you're responsible for is creating a treatment plan. What are the options, or what is the option that for addressing these things? And while many of us know that a missing tooth has 4 different options: do nothing, bridge it if you can, removable partial denture, or an implant supported crown, 4 pretty simple options, you are the one who must determine whether any or all of those are viable. And in many cases, your patient wants your recommendation. Which one do you believe is the better or the best of all of these options? That's the job of the dentist. And then the next to the final one is to execute dentistry, to actually provide the care. None of the rest of us can do that, nor should we. So that's 4: examination, diagnosis, treatment plan, execution of care. And number 5, I think, is to oversee the clinical function and standard of care in the practice. That's what you're responsible for. In the ideal practice, just as clean and slick as we can get it, that's what you come in every day and do. You can have fun, enjoyable when you do it, but in the ideal practice, you're not having to worry about whether there's a leak, or the toilet is stopped up, or the sign isn't lit out front, or whatever it is. That's really what you hire the rest of us for. And so in the world that Tracy and I try to help our clients create, we focus on ensuring that you are absolutely engaged with these things that are your clinical obligation, and that you know what is happening in all these other arenas in your practice, but that you don't have to handle the day-to-day obligations for it. So if you think about, if you had a competent person as your practice manager, and I absolutely believe that a bunch of you on this phone call who are practice managers are very competent in this role. So as a clinician, what do you want your practice manager to do for you? Well, you want that person, be it a he or be it a she, to know exactly how you think about things, how you want your day-to-day operations to run. Here's a perfect example. How are you willing to be paid? What are the options that you're willing to agree to? Are you willing to agree to somebody paying you whenever the heck they feel like it? Do you want to have to be paid at the time of service? And I mean really paid at the time of service? Do you want to be prepaid for certain services? Many dentists now, particularly for things that aren't covered by their dental insurance plans, many dentists as private medical practices in the United States, I can't remember how it is in Australia. I think um, cosmetic work like liposuction and faceless, I think that's not covered by your medical health, but I'm not positive. But in the US, it's not covered by anybody's medical insurance. So people who do in vitro fertilization, for example, in the US, cosmeticians, facelifts and liposuction and that kind of stuff, that's all prepaid. You pay for it ahead of time. And then if you don't show up, you forfeit it. All right. I'm not recommending that, but I'm not unrecommending it either. Somewhere between pay me whenever you want and everything is paid ahead of time before we even make your appointment is the way in which you want financial arrangements to be handled. And it's not necessarily one size fits all, is it? There are some procedures, some circumstances for which you are happier to be paid over a period of time than others. So if I'm your practice manager, I have to know how you think about this. You have to make sure that I understand the limits and the permissions you give me. You and I have to work together so I can test an idea. Well, now this is a little different than what we talked about. What should I do here? What do you think about that? Here's a new thing we didn't even think about, you and I, when we were talking about this. What do you how do you think we should handle that? So you and I'm the practice manager, you're the dentist, we have to have these ongoing conversations so that over a period of time, because we want long-term employees, no question about it. Too expensive to keep hiring and training people. Over a period of time, I get so tuned in to how you think that as a bit of a new situation comes up that's just a little bit different than the last time, I know how you would probably interpret it. So I don't have to keep going to running to you throughout the day to try to figure out what you would do if you were in my position. And I'm going to trump that right now. Oh, I said the word Trump. You're watching our American elections, aren't you? Sorry. I'm going to go you one better. You want me, your practice manager, to be smarter than you are in many ways. There are times when somebody says to you, well, doctor, what should I do? This or that. And you want to say to yourself, I have no clue. I'm not good in that area. That's not where my training is. You want somebody to come on board who's got more insight, who's wiser, who understands the implications of things way farther down the path than you might recognize it or understand it. That's what you want from those people you hire in these key roles in your practice manager. So that you say, well, I don't know, in this circumstance, maybe we should do this. And the practice manager is able to say to you, because she or he is smart, mature, competent, and you respect that person's opinion, says to you, look, I'm worried that if we do that, this might happen. And I think that problem will be harder to deal with than this one we have right in front of us. Here's the way I would suggest we do it. That's what you want out of your practice manager. Someone who, in many ways, is smarter than you are. This is someone that you form a collaborative partnership with, not someone who just sort of goes off and does whatever the hell they want, whenever they want it, under any circumstances. This is a person who is really melded in sync with you, so that the two of you are constantly looking at and refining and improving how you're running the practice together. You're always in control because you always get to say no or yes for something that's really, really important for you. Listen, if you want to do free dentistry for a particular group of people in the US certainly, and in some places there, dentists who belong to a particular religious order, as part of their contributions to their religious order, will do free dentistry for the clerics. In the US, the big, I think the most notable one is that a lot of dentists who are Catholic will provide free dentistry for the priests and the nuns in their diocese, for example. If that's what you want to do, that is fine. You always get to be in control of that, in charge of that. On the other hand, if I'm your practice manager, I know one of my jobs is to make sure you get paid. I want you to decide who you're going to give free dentistry to, not the patient to decide by not paying you. I'm the overseer and the protector of the financial soundness of your business. That's part of my job as the practice manager. I will tell you that. This person who's charged with doing that for you cannot be a mousy, fearful, weak person. The person who's charged with doing that for you has to be strong, not mean, has to be competent, not bossy. That person has to be very grounded and sound, confident in the sense that I know this is what the doctor wants and needs, and I'm here to protect the best interest of the doctor and the practice. This whole role of practice manager is so very, very, very important. And in many cases, what Tracy and I observe, forgive us doctors, is that you put people in this role, you don't give them any training, you give them barely any authority, and they're a slot through which you push, this is what I want, tell me what you want, this is what I want, tell me what you want. They're just not given the authority, the permission, the tools they need to competently handle those aspects of the practice for which the practice manager role is meant. So when we're together at Marketing Dentistry, this is exactly what we're going to be working on. We're going to be looking at every single role in the practice, every single obligation in the practice, what needs to be done in the practice, aside from you doing the dentistry and those things. And then who's going to do it? Now, how are we going to prepare that person? What are the permissions? How will you evaluate things with each other? How will the practice manager have a conduit to you and vice versa? Those are the kinds of things that we're going to be working on. Now, why is that important? Well, I started off talking about how much farther ahead we are as Americans than you poor Aussies in messing things up. We're way far ahead of you. And the kinds of things that are threatening our practices here and are threatening your practices, and how much more experience we've had in not doing a very good job of dealing with it. And I've said to you that other than the clinical issues, I believe that the solution, the answer to every single challenge you face, other than an implant failure, the solution to all of that is the strength of your team. And I believe that it's very hard to have a strong, highly functioning team in the absence of a strong practice manager. Now, listen, if you're a team of 3 people, then you have a person at reception who has to be the practice manager, has to take on the role of dealing with everyday functioning and operations of the practice. That's what that role ends up being. If you're larger, if there are 8 or 10 of you, for example, then the practice manager role grows because that person is now overseeing the day-to-day operations that impact many more people than just the other 2 of you. And that person has to have more tools, more permissions, more time to work with things. And when I talk about permissions, this is really important. If Jane's role in the practice is this, and this, you don't know because you're in the surgery making tooth dust over there. You don't know how Jane is performing. You just don't have any idea. You can see if she has a smile on her face and she seems relatively pleasant and you didn't really get any complaints this month about her. That you can do. But who are your eyes and ears in areas where you are not someone who is overseeing all of that? And you don't want that practice manager to have as his or her only tool rushing to you between patients and Jane's not doing this and she said this and what should I do about it, doctor? You seriously, where's your brain? Your brain is in clinical dimension. It needs to stay there. And for you to have to go from one surgery to the next surgery and in between have to deal with a staffing issue because you don't have a competent practice manager is nuts. It's absolutely insane. I can bet none of you says, oh, that's what I really like to do. I can't wait to hear the next staff problem. No. So what you want is that practice manager to be able to deal with that issue with that team member in the moment and to be able to report to you at your weekly or bi-weekly board of directors meeting, leadership and management team meeting. There are several things that occurred today. I just want you to be aware that Jane and I have been working on her telephone skills or her whatever it is, and I've let her know that this is something that you and I both expect will improve very quickly for her, or whatever. You get a report that things are happening, that the practice manager is on top of it, and that you know what's going on, but you're not burdened by what's going on. You're relieved from what's going on. This role of practice manager is designed to ensure that when the air conditioner is running, the back door is closed. Are patients being handled well? Now, ideally, I mentioned to you earlier that in the board of directors leadership and management team that Tracy and I talk about, depending on the size of your practice, of course, ideally, you are the clinical oversight person for those things that you as the dentist must be responsible for. You have a practice manager who is the chief operating officer, COO. Board level, board of directors level, you have a patient coordinator, or we call it facilitator, patient coordinator, who oversees ongoing patient relationships. This is a really key practice, and it is one, I believe, that has the best opportunity to be revenue producing. If I were to visit your rooms and I could somehow randomly pull out the records, whether they're digital or not. Oh God, we still have people in the US who are on paper charts. I'm not kidding. Pull out patient records, maybe of people who haven't been to your practice in 2 or 3 years, and ask you a simple question. Where are you with this patient clinically? Um, what did this person have done and why? What have you recommended that's not been done, and why is the patient not pursuing that? Great, good questions in terms of building and continuing and developing your practice. You would probably not know, understandably, because you got that clinical job to do. But who would? Who would know? Who's on top of that? And who is able to catch that and deal with it and address it before it gets to be 3 years since we've seen the patient? Who does that? In the model that Tracy and I talk about, whether you have enough bodies or not, the role is still a legitimate one. Patient coordinator, facilitator, someone who oversees patients coming into your practice for the first time through their first series of initial visits to the point that they have a treatment plan. They've discussed the treatment options you're prepared to offer, excuse me. They've addressed issues of fees and financing and insurance help and all of that, scheduling, timing of issues, that kind of thing. And they actually have to have care. That's the first obligation of the patient coordinator. Now, that may be, if you have a small practice, another role of the person at reception, but it's got to be done. Because if you don't do it, you lose connection with your customers, with your patients. Somebody's got to be on top of that. You can't afford, even in a small practice, particularly in a small practice actually, for something with a patient to just fall through the cracks. A year later, somebody says, whatever happened to Mrs. Patel? I mean, she was coming in and we did some things and she said she was going to do some more, and then you call Mrs. Patel and Mrs. Patel says, oh yeah, I was waiting on you to call me and tell me it was time to go ahead. I've got a question here, so I'm going to read this to you. I've recently implemented flexible payment plans for every procedure, and far more people are accepting treatment. Irrespective of everything else, I don't think we can underestimate our patients' cash flow issues and how expensive dentistry seems to be to them. I absolutely agree with you. There's something that I've said for a long time and that's that really for our patients, almost anybody can afford almost anything they want, but almost nobody can afford everything they want. And while we certainly want patients to put dentistry at the highest level of their priority list, that's not always going to happen. I mean, really, you're going to take your grandkids to Disney World. I mean, what things do you have to give up in order to be able to afford to do that? Something. Taking your kids to Disney World or Disneyland, I don't know which one you're going to, is a once in a lifetime event. It's very special. For a grandparent to do that for grandchildren is memorable. So we can't underestimate how important these other things are in the lives of our patients. So in running your business, it is important, all of you, that you figure out what the parameters of payment are that work for you and work for your patients. Because if it doesn't work for your patients, it isn't going to work for you, right? You have to have, and listen, it's not my place to say what that ought to be. For Clive to have experimented with something and come up with an idea and tested it out and made sure that it works for him and his finances and all of that, fabulous, fabulous. Now, let's think about what you're saying. You've implemented flexible payment plans. You have to know when you feel good and what offering flexible payment plans and what flexible means, because it means something different to everybody. So there's the person, I would certainly hope, well, maybe you're so exceptional, Clive. I'll say it this way. I don't want the dentist to have to decide the payment plan for patient A versus patient B versus patient C. I don't want you to have to do that. I mean, if you love doing that, hey, have at it. But my experience is that most dentists are not really good at that. Um, and in the moment, they tend to sort of give away the store. So, what I would wish for you is that you've got a really strong, competent, in tune with you practice manager who partners with you in making decisions. I mean, ideally your practice manager came to you and said, doctor, I think uh, that we would have more people agreeing to dentistry if we offered more flexible payment plans. And here's the idea I'd like to test. That's a great role for a practice manager, not to just wait till you come up with every solution to every problem that you come up with. So I like hearing that you're experimenting with things and that it's working well for you. And I'll just say one more thing, Dr. Krager, about what you're saying here, Clive. What you've said is, this is important. Irrespective of everything else, I don't think we can underestimate our patients' cash flow issues and how expensive dentistry seems to them. It's very easy. That's such a key thing that you've said here. It's very easy for us to live in our own world and not really understand and connect well with what's going on with these people who are our customers, our patients. And to have a team member who is able to look at the patterns of what patients are experiencing, to give you feedback, to be able to say to you, look, you're very aggressive, or you're not suggestive enough, or people really do want your opinion, give it to them, please, or whatever it is that someone outside of you is coming up with has got to be helpful for you. Doctor, when you explain things, I know a lot about dentistry and I don't understand a lot of what you're saying. So we've got to find a way between the two of us. I'm going to read something else that you've written here, which is great. Um, so, doctor, I want to help you use language that patients understand better. I don't know if the rest of you can read the notes here, so I'm going to read it. We have a ready reckoner, and the girls handle the presentation of this. The patient goes into a private consult area. Yes, hallelujah. Sits down with every patient to get a payment plan. The treatment that Dr. Krager has prescribed today is $2,700. The way we do it here, it's just $99 per week. Is that okay with you? And listen, if that's a financial arrangement, Clive, that works for your business, works for you financially, and if you find that you're able to actually collect $99 a week, and so for $2,700 you've got what, my math is terrible, either 27 or 270 week is going to pay you. So is it 4 years? If or it's either 4 months or 4 years. I'm terrible at math. Do you see why I don't do that? If that works for you, and if you're able to run your business on that money coming in over that period of time. Fantastic. Fantastic. The point is that in all aspects of your practice, and Clive has really given us a good example of that today, in all aspects of your practice, you've got to have switched on people who are able to do that, to go into that private room and have that conversation and discuss that with the patient and recognize that the patient is connecting with what you recommended and why, and that the financial, if the financial issue is the barrier, is there a way in our practice that we can ameliorate that we can make that financial issue not a barrier? And that requires permission from you, Clive, training, maturity, confidence. You cannot have a shrinking violet in there to do that. They have to believe that whatever it is you've recommended is very important for them, not because you said so, not more important to you than to them, but it's very important, and that they you to provide this for them, and that you've given them a really good way to get from here to there, and that they remain committed to paying this $99 a week, even though it might be completed. And as long as you've got systems and structure and someone to oversee all of that through this process, I have no issue with what your financial arrangements are. I just think you got to have them. I'm bringing my team to see you in Brisbane. Can you cover this topic? I'm so glad you are. Thank you, Clive. I appreciate this. Uh, I will make sure that I talk with your team about this topic. Probably, you know what is good. Let's try to gather at lunch, and we'll have a discussion. Anybody who wants to be involved in this, but I'll absolutely make sure that we talk about this in Brisbane when I'm there. So thank you. I'm so glad you're coming. Bravo. So I think we're at the end of our hour. I'm very happy to stay on a little bit longer, particularly for any questions that you have. I think the administrator is going to put up a code on your screen for you right now. Let's see if folks can do. There we go. Perfect, perfect. I want to make sure that I offer you a special way to register for marketing dentistry if you've not done so already. The code is Sandy Roth 100. You will get $100 off of your registration for marketing dentistry. It's going to be good for a week. So one of the reasons we are doing these webinars is that we want you to know the kind of what I think is really solid, no fluff help with the kinds of things that are focusing on your attention in your dental world, and invite you, encourage you to come and join us, because Tracy and I are going to be working with dentists and their practice managers. Dr. Michael Abernathy is going to have a program that's separate from ours, that you're of course invited to choose as well. And David Penn is going to do an opening short program talking about the kinds of things that he is so uniquely able to do. We are also going to be having a panel at the conclusion of the program, so that anything that's come up during the day that you just want to toss by us. And of course, Tracy and I and Dr. Pan and Dr. Abernathy, we will all be there throughout the whole program during breaks and all of that to have informal conversations with you. We are also available, so you know, primarily in Melbourne, but certainly in other cities if we can arrange it, to do private consulting with you for any issue that's coming up for you that you want to spend time with us on. Tracy and I are both available. We have several times during our time in Melbourne. I'm arriving actually in Australia on the 31 July, and I don't leave till the end of August. So I have a lot of open days that I am available for private consultation with you, should that be something that you're interested in. And either you can write to me directly at Sandy, Sandy, at ProSynergy, PROSYNERGY, and .com, and they will have all of that information at the IDM office. So if you need to get that again, Sandy at prosynergy.com. I can talk with you about any private consultation that you would like while I'm in country. And I'm looking to see if there are any other questions. Thank you, Clive, so much for your comments and your questions. And Adam, are you still there? I think I still see you. Any comments or questions for you or anyone else who's on? I'm happy to stay on this session as long as you like. How many staff should a sole practitioner have ideally? What a great question. And ideally, ideal is really hard. But listen, I believe that you do need to have someone who oversees the day-to-day functioning of your practice. I would call that the practice manager. Sometimes that practice manager, if you are a single practitioner and you have a surgical or dental nurse or chairside assistant working with you, the question is, how many rooms are you working? Are you going from room to room? Or are you just working one room? If you are able to have auxiliary staff, and different states in Australia tend to have more auxiliaries than others. If you have a dental hygienist, for example, or a therapist, you will need to have additional staff to support that process, because those patients for that other provider have to be scheduled, have to be tended to when they arrive, their fees and their financial arrangements have to be discussed. My ideal practice would be a dentist who's fully functioning with a very strong surgical or chairside assistant or dental nurse, very strong. Someone who's able to engage with patients, not a piece of furniture. I think it's really important to have a number of non-clinical people, because nothing will build your practice better than high functioning reception. Ideally, reception / practice manager overseeing day-to-day operations, and a patient coordinator who's also doing marketing and ensuring that patients are heard and understood, and following up with patients and making sure patients come back and finding out why they don't, and figuring out how to deal with the internal operations of your practice on this board of directors. So we've got the dentist, the practice manager, and the patient coordinator. Board of directors. 3 of you are getting together regularly and having conversations about how to handle the numbers of patients, or too many, too few, whatever. Veronica is saying, with our treatment plan follow-ups, our patients don't answer the calls or call us back. Should our next step be to send them the treatment plan in the mail? We always give them a printed treatment plan when they leave their appointment. So will this be too much? No. What is too much? Thank you, Veronica. I think what is too much is barrage calling. There are all these systems that people will tell you to do out there. I say, oh, right? Listen, what happens when that patient is there, when they get that treatment plan? How tuned in are you to where that patient is? You know, because you're smart, and your gut tells you this patient ain't buying this. They don't want this. This treatment plan is more than the patient had in mind, or there's no way they can afford it. I mean, you know that, either because the patient, rarely, but sometimes, tells you that, or you just get a suspicion. So let's think about how a mature, competent practice manager would function. I'm sitting down with this patient. I engaged with the patient on the phone. I was there through the first appointment. I was there while the dentist was coming up with the treatment options. I saw the patient glaze over or whatever. I saw whatever. The dentist isn't going to see that because they don't think like that. We don't want you to. Dentist has gone on to someplace else and is something else. I'm now sitting there knee to knee at the desk or at reception or wherever it is, talking with that patient. I have to have the skill set, competence, the authority, and the maturity to say, Mrs. Jones, tell me about how you're feeling about what Dr. Roth suggested for you, in such a safe way that that patient can say to me truthfully whatever it is they think. That was way more than I expected. There's no way I could afford that. Um, I was hoping blah, 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 whatever. You want the connection at that time, Veronica, to be so strong that when the patient says, and they will, and there's nothing wrong with when the patient says, I really need to go home and talk about this with my husband. How many multi-thousand-dollar decisions do one or the other of spouses make on their own without consulting the other one? Not often. Not in economic time, but there's a lot of competition for finances, right? I love when people say that, because then I can say to them, I'm glad to hear that you're open to thinking about it. And I want to know when you and I should talk next. I want almost make an appointment to talk with that person. And I also want to give them assurance. I want to be able to say to that patient, listen, if this is something that we can help make affordable, we'd love to do that for you, because I know you'd like to have this done and we'd love to do it for you. If, however, there are other issues that are going to stand in your way, then let's make a time to talk with the doctor and find out if there are any options that could work for you financially or time-wise or whatever it is. See, why does that not happen in your practice? Does it happen in your practice? If it does, fantastic. If it doesn't, now I'm going to go back to what Karen was saying about how many people should you have? Why does that not happen in a smaller practice? Because we don't have the time to do it. We don't have the time. We're answering the phone, we're doing this, we're doing all of these things. And so even in a small practice, Karen, particularly in a small practice, that patient walking out the door without some kind of real connection, because we didn't have the time to talk about it, we didn't have the skills to discuss it, we didn't have Clive's, options for payments, we didn't have that available. For that person to walk out the door, that's the air conditioner on and the back door open. That's a really good example of how that happens. How much does it cost you to get a new patient in your practice? Enough in most cases for us to be able to afford to have a team member who's really good at doing that. Because saving a patient relationship, at least tethering it to the next time we're going to talk. Now, what do we do the next time we're going to talk? So now we're going to go back to Veronica's question. Veronica had this engaged conversation with the patient. The patient said, look, I need a couple of weeks to think about this. I'm going to say to the patient, I'm happy to give you a call. Let me give you a call and I'll see where your thinking is. Now, when I call, it better be on that same personal level we'd established when that patient walked out the door. So when I do call, it better be, Mrs. Patel, this is Veronica. I am calling at your suggestion and your request, and I know you and your spouse were going to be talking about this. You recall, of course, that when we talked before, I think you let me know that financing was an issue for you. And I just want to know where your thinking is on that and whether or not there has been any resolution and, what should we be doing? Because I certainly don't want to miss the opportunity to help you. And I don't want you to feel in any way that we're neglecting you or not paying attention to you. That's what I want. That's the nature of that conversation I'm going to see. Clive is back. In my experience, if the patient leaves without accepting treatment, the chances of them accepting treatment diminishes a lot. I don't think that that uh, is incorrect. I think that is true, which is why we've gone down to the 99% a week route. We offer to everyone, so we're not asking if they can afford treatment. We just make it as easy as possible for everyone. He says it seems to work as treatment acceptance has improved a lot. I would rather have a dollar coming in the future than not at all. Okay. Um, I think this idea, which I think many people are experimenting with, is one that is catching hold. Um, and the only I do agree that if people go out without making an appointment, um, the chances can diminish. But it's not necessarily true that you've lost all your opportunities. I will tell you that even at $99 a week, many people would feel that they need to talk with their spouse or their partner about it. Because even at $99 a week, that's $400 a month, and that's $2,700 in all, right? My math is really wrong on that, wasn't it, Clive? That's a commitment of family resources. So I would not necessarily consider it a failure if they left without making a commitment to it. Now, here's the other thing I would encourage you to monitor a little bit, and that's sometimes people will agree to treatment and they'll make an appointment and then they'll get home and they'll call and they'll change it. They'll cancel it. And sometimes they won't be honest with you about what they're doing. They'll say, "Oh, I have to change that. I have a conflict. I have to go to Vanuatu, and I'll call you back." For me, that statement is, I sort of feel like I got talked into it, and I've changed my mind, but I'm not willing to say that to you. So I would make sure, Clive, and all of you, that when you hear that, you have someone on the phone who has the presence of mind to engage if possible. So, Mrs. Jones, I want to make sure that I understand that if this is just a scheduling issue, of course. I want to make sure, however, that if anything's changed about how the way you think about what Dr. Krager is proposing to do, if you're having second thoughts about that, please understand that's where you are. So we don't call you back to try to schedule something that really in your heart is not where you want to be right now. And Clive, here's why I think this is really important. And I'm actually not disagreeing with anything you said, but here's why I think that getting a sense of what's really going really crowded and I couldn't keep them clean and it was really hard. And I knew that, but my husband was a tightwad. He wouldn't part with a nickel. And he died about 6 months ago. And I loved him, she said, but boy, was he a tightwad. He wouldn't spend anything on me. And what I realized is he didn't spend anything on anything. And when he died, I was a pretty wealthy woman. And one of the first things I did was I called this practice and I said, I want those braces. So here's my point. A lot of times people's circumstances change and they change on nothing we have done, but it's their life circumstances that change. We want, when those circumstances change, for them to say, Dr. Krager, he's the guy. He's my dentist. I'm going back there. We want our culture to be so non-judgmental and inviting and warm and responsive to them that even $99 a week would have been too much before, but now I'm able to take care of it. That's my sort of general kind of response. I have many stories like that that are all true about how patients adjust. And gosh, I see that there are still a bunch of you on here. I'm so glad. We could go on all day, couldn't we? Are you hungry? Is it time for your dinner yet, you guys? Um, did he die from heart disease linked to periodontal issues? I don't know, but that could be it, Clive. Okay, any other comments? If there's anything coming up for you, I don't want to rush you guys off. So, what do you think of care plans where a third party offers finance via the dental office? Yeah, it's basically like a dental or a medical or a veterinary credit card. We have them in the U.S. and there's several of them here. I think it's pure and simple a business decision. When they basically, it's like a credit card. So I go and I sign up and I have $5,000 worth of credit with Care Credit, and then I can take it to the dental office or the vet or wherever I'm going to go, and I use that like a credit card. What happens is, of course, is that the dentist pays a fee, and then the patient can either have no interest if they pay it off by a certain time, or some kind of interest or whatever it is. I think they work very, very well for many people. And one of the advantages of that is, and see, this is different than what Clive is offering, but I might offer this as well. I mean, I think that there are many different options out there for financing. You just have to decide if that whatever the fee is that you have to pay for a patient to use that financing is going to work with your business plan. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. Just go online, and in the case of Care Credit, you put it through and the money's in your account in full, probably, Clive, within 2 or 3 days. And then everything is hands off. You don't have to collect a dime. That's between the care plan and the patient, right? So you're out of it at that point. You don't have to. What I don't like, this is me, and many people would feel different about it than I do. I don't like, now we're going to go back to what Karen was asking, how many people do you need? I don't like you having, Karen, to employ a person to collect money you've already earned. I think that's very expensive money to collect. So collecting from insurance companies or collecting from a patient who's getting a billing cycle or something from you, I think that's extremely hard. And if, Clive, you figured out how to do that with a direct deposit, or it's going to come to you automatically out of their bank account, and you don't have any problems with people closing that account and that kind of thing, I think that's wonderful. But what I don't want is this is what I wouldn't want for you. Somebody owes you $1,000 and they never pay it, and now we have to hire somebody to collect that money from the patient, or we have to turn it over to a collection agency, or we don't get it at all. I think that's really very expensive money. And the question I always ask is, would you rather do no dentistry and not get paid, or do dentistry and not get paid? If you do no dentistry and not get paid, you can take some time off. That's just me. So, okay. The problem with finance is that the patient needs to be approved with direct debit services. There's not a credit check. Sure, I don't get the money up front, but I also have the money coming in each month for work I've already completed, which evens out my cash flow. Very small failure rate. Yes. Okay. So listen, what if I guess all of you are able to read Clive's comments. Here's the thing that's important. This Clive knows his business. He knows his business. He knows his patients. It's a direct deposit. It comes directly out of their account. They sign something that says it comes out. You're not doing collections. That's fine. In your case, Clive, you've determined that this is a good financial decision for you and for your patients. And you're willing to take the hit if you, for some reason, you don't get paid. But you're also not having to pay an employee to chase after money. See, these are the kinds of decisions that as the owner of the business, you need to make on that level, and have team members working for you who get that's what they're being asked to take care of. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, sometimes patients need to be approved. I don't know. Let's just talk about this. There might be there might be a set of procedures, Clive, where you wouldn't be willing to accept $99 a week. I mean, I don't know. Somehow you have a $40,000 treatment plan or a $20,000 treatment plan. You have to decide if you're willing to do it for that much. And so a lot of dentists will decide between this and this is what we'll agree to. Between that and that, this is what we'll agree to. And as I said, there's certain procedures for which some dentists decide it's a prepaid procedure because they really can't afford to have a patient not show up for a 2-hour, implant, whatever it is. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear your experience. Very small failure rate. Good for you. Good for you. All right, other comments or questions? Where are we? I've overly simplified this because I'm not very good at typing, but we take deposits to cover lab costs. Okay, perfect. But I totally get that this is a, a, a concept that's out there. So, and what I like very much about what you're saying, Clive, is that you're paying lots of attention to what's going on in your business, and you've got yourself covered, so you feel confident about what's going on. Bravo! I look forward to seeing you and your whole team in Brisbane for sure. Anybody else, Clive? Thank you for the extra time. We've eaten. Oh, you have eaten, Karen. Okay, good. You have. It's about 6:30. The sun is starting to come up here in Florida, so I'll just keep you. Anything else I can help you with? I'm so happy to make connections. Listen, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm up and going now. Let's keep going for as long as you like, guys. See you in Brisbane. Thanks, Sandy. You are so welcome, Clive. Anybody else? I'm very happy for you lurkers to put a concept or a question in there. Or to write to me individually if you like. Sandy at prosynergy.com. PROSYNERGY. And my understanding is you're going to get a link for this webinar, so you'll be able to listen to it again, and you'll be able to see get my email address if you'd like to. I'll be there starting the 31 of July. Any further comments or questions for anybody? All right, I think I will give you all a good day, and I look forward to seeing you in just a few short weeks. And thank you so much for taking the part of your Wednesday evening after a long day of work to spend some time with me. It's my pleasure to be here. I love Australia. Been there 16 times. This is going to be number 17 for me, and I'm always very excited to come and see you all, spend some time with you, and contribute what I can to dentistry and learn what I need to know. So any other questions, comments? All right, there are 13 of you still on, so my much appreciation for your joining me. I will see you soon, and please come to see us at Marketing Dentistry. You've got your code now to get your discount. Sandy Roth $100 off. Thank you, Karen, very much for joining. I appreciate it. All right, everybody, I'm getting ready to end the session unless I hear anything else right now. Oh, Eric Fung is typing. I'm going to wait. You're welcome, Eric. Thank you. Am I going to see you at one of the meetings? I hope. All right, I hope I see all of you. Please come see us. I'm still thinking about it. Eric, what are you thinking about? Come see us. This is going to be I hope you will think positively about joining, coming to marketing. Okay, good. Bravo. I'll look forward to seeing you, Eric. Thank you. Dala is typing now. Oh, Dahlia was typing. Thanks, Sandy. Much appreciated. Thank you, Dahlia. So glad that you guys were all able to join me. And be there, aloha. Come see us. Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, Marketing Dentistry. Thank you all very much. I hope to talk with you soon and certainly see you at Marketing Dentistry. Good night, everybody.